Well, welcome to H360 Health Talk. Today we're going to be talking about caregiving. And there's so many topics, and we've talked about this before. The caregiving ranges for so many topics, but we're going to get into it, the discussion today with Debra Hallisey, who is the founder of Advocate for Mom and Dad. Debra is a certified caregiver and consultant with over 25 years of experience as a consultant, building and enhancing corporate training programs. So she's out there in the thick of it, doing some great work. But not only does she have this company that does great work, she's also a very experienced caregiver. She was a caregiver for her mother, who was disabled and had to care for her after her father passed away. Debra, welcome to the table for the first time.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, caregivers, first of all, I got to say, they're the unsung heroes in the whole healthcare equation. At Health Talk, we've had pharma executives on, and we've had physicians, and we've had patients. And we're fortunate enough to have caregivers come in, and the stories that I hear and the things they have to go through, it's just incredible. So there's so many things that we can talk about today, but one of the things I find is people that start companies, especially in the area of healthcare or caregiving, more times than not, they do have a personal story behind kind of doing what they're doing. And so why don't we start by, and I know you have a personal story, but why don't we share that with our Healthy O 360 audience?
Sure, I would love to. My mom is legally blind and has mobility issues. And so my dad has been her caregiver for a number of years. And it's as much about he did all the banking, he did the cleaning and things like that, and also helped her with some, what we call the activities of daily living, making sure the shower was turned on so she could get into it. Right. And so in 2014, he was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. And that was for the first time really when I started to think, okay, we always expected him to outlive her because he was healthier.
Right.
And it was really the first time I thought, okay, this is going to turn around.
Yeah.
And honestly, I had made a decision years ago. I'm the daughter. I'm closest in proximity, and I had moved back to New Jersey, kind of expecting to needing to help my parents.
Yeah.
So I'm about 50 minutes away, which is doable. But when Dad was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, I knew that I was going to be responsible for Mom. 2014 was a very difficult year. I went to the doctors with him. He was hospitalized, and we lost him in 2015. What wound up happening through that was I lost my job. We lost him in February. I lost my job in October. I was a consultant my entire career, worked for big consulting firms, and the firm I was with generously gave me time to get my mom settled, but it meant I wasn't billable.
Yeah.
Which as a consultant you have to be. So
Sure.
At the end of the year when they weren't making their numbers, I hadn't made mine, I was gone.
Right.
It turned out to be a blessing.
Yeah.
From some of the hardest things, some of the best things can happen. And through that experience, I founded this company called Advocate for Mom and Dad. And interestingly enough, it's my mom who really said to me at one point, "You have learned so much, you should share that."
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, okay." So, and it's just wild. I didn't start out to do this. I started out really looking for a job in my field, which was training. And then I went to one networking event and met 3 people that changed the course of my life. And I walked outside of that event and said, okay, I'm going to make a go of this. I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah. Okay, so your father, before he's diagnosed with congestive heart failure, how long was he caregiving for your mother?
Good 20 years.
Right.
Yeah, good 20 years.
So there's so many similarities to my family, I'm hearing, because my mother, who is an Alzheimer's patient, my father's the caregiver. They're in their early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's still at home for the time being. We're beginning now to look at assisted living facilities, but I can see my dad's health declining. And he was a guy who would golf, and he would never take a cart. He'd walk 18 holes 2-3 times a week. So he was pretty fit, pretty healthy. But the toll it was taking, it is taking on him as being the full-time caregiver for my mother. You can physically see it.
Yeah.
And you can see it by just his shortness and his tolerance.
Yes.
He is gaining some weight.
Yeah.
He's not eating properly. He was never the cook in the family. Now, he was the griller, but he wasn't officially, cooking the meals. It was my mom's job, and the kids would clean up and do the dishes.
Yeah.
Right, but now he's doing it all.
Yeah.
So do you think that caregiving 20 years for your mother may have had something to do with his getting sick?
Oh, absolutely. He had a heart attack about 10 years before he passed, and then he had a stent defibrillator put in about 5 years after that. But he managed it quite well with exercise and eating. He really took care of himself. But the stress of that, the constantly being on the go, and interestingly enough, there's the physical stress, and then there's the mental stress.
Mm-hmm.
And the mental stress for my dad was one is he shielded my mom from a lot of things, including how ill he was. I knew how sick he was because I was going to the doctors with him.
Right.
And I would say to my mom, and I have an older brother who lives about 12 hours away, and I would, tell my brother and sister and my mom, we're on borrowed time that year of 2014.
Uh-huh.
But what does that mean? I can't say he's going to go in a year or 2 years. But all I can say is, Mommy, he's really sick and we're on borrowed time. But when you're married for 61 years,
right,
and your husband's your caretaker and he has shielded you, my mother and my brother and my sister-in-law were surprised when he actually died.
Hmm.
And so I think there was a lot of mental stress on my dad to keep up that front.
Sure.
And quite frankly, it was hard on me because my dad and I were a team, but it was also my burden to bear.
Right.
And I couldn't really say a lot. And It wasn't until after he died I realized how hard that had been for me.
Yeah.
But I do think it was the emotional as much as the physical. And it's interesting, after he died, I talked to a lot of people, and this is where he shielded. I had people say to me, I'd see your dad in ShopRite, and he had to stop and rest on a bench.
Mm.
He never told us, because we would have done stuff. We would have gotten people in to help, but it's that generation. You do it.
Yeah, that's right.
You do it.
Yeah. You just do what it takes.
You just do what it takes.
So when he passes and now you're kind of cast into this new role as being the caregiver for your mom, what was if he'd been caregiving for 20 years, what was her health when you kind of came on the scene as the caregiver?
She actually, I swear to God, she's going to outlive me. Not good, she's going to outlive me. She's a diabetic, but she manages it quite well.
Yeah.
And legally blind and mobility issues. But in her house, she uses a cart. If we leave, we use a wheelchair. But she's really quite healthy for someone who's going to be 87 and has these physical problems. And this is part of my advice when I talk to people about caregiving. Every relationship is a contract. Right? So my mother had a marital contract with my father, how they did things.
Yeah.
The 2 weeks in November that my dad was in the hospital, there were things my father did that I said to Mommy, I just can't. Here's, you and Daddy have this routine when you go to bed. I can't keep it up. Yeah. I'm exhausted. What can we change?
Yeah.
And the one thing we changed is instead of having to get all her stuff to brush her teeth in the kitchen so she can sit down, it's in the kitchen. And she gets it. So when he was so sick, there were already things that I was saying to her, we need to change this process. We need to change this dynamic. I simply can't do it. And God bless my mother. She has stepped up in ways I never expected her. The changes she has made continue to awe me. And I tell her, I'm so proud of you. I know how hard this is of you.
Yeah.
But I asked her to do it. And I think as caregivers, we get into, I have to keep it up. That's the way they have to do it. And actually, no. This is a new contract. You get to renegotiate.
That's an interesting point. So So when you're renegotiating that contract, where do you start? Do you, as the caregiver that's coming in, do you take an inventory of all the things that are going on and then take a step back and look at it all and say, is this going to fit into my role as the caregiver?
It's partially that, and it's partially situational, right? Like I think the tendency for me was to try and like do things a lot of the same ways. Here was the turning point for me. There was two turning points. After we lost my father, one of the first conversations I had with my mom is, Mom, there are no more secrets.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. If there's something wrong with this house, I'm going to tell you about it. And as a team, we're going to make a decision. Because frankly, it's your money that's going to fix it, not mine. And you're a smart woman with all your faculties. So we're going to be a team. And I'm not going to shield you from anything any longer, which is what my dad did. So that was a huge dynamic change. Huge dynamic change for my mom. And actually there was something my dad said to Mom the night before he died that I think already put her in the mindset. And that's private to them. But that stone was already laid, and I'm grateful for that. And then there were just things that happened situationally. Like all of a sudden I found myself going, man, you're just really cranky. What's going on here?
Yeah.
Okay, what's going on here is I can't do this.
Yeah.
I'll give you another situation. I had 3 months at home to get my mama settled. And it was all on me to make the phone calls, do all these things. We interviewed people.
And this is while you're still working?
This is while I'm still working.
Okay.
Right? I'm working now out of my mother's home to get her situated for 3 months. So I'm working on internal projects, which is why I didn't meet my numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. And one day they had a drive, and the next day that was negotiable. Right?
Yeah.
And like one time I'm sitting there and this light bulb went off and I went, she's working me.
Yeah.
She is absolutely working me, and it ends now.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, Mom, in a month I have to go back to work and you're not settled.
Yeah.
And I have to go back to traveling. So guess what? You are now in charge of making these calls and finding your caregiver. I will support you in this.
Absolutely.
But you are in charge.
And how did she take that news?
A little resistant, and I had to coach her.
Yeah.
But guess what? She did it.
Yeah.
She did it. Again, stepping up to the plate, asking her to do something, different dynamic than my dad, but it's a different relationship.
Yeah. So you said you take over as a caregiver. You go to a conference. You meet a few people. What was said at the conference that really made the light bulb go off? You said, this is what I have to be doing.
So I'll give a shout out to the Princeton Chamber. It was a Princeton Chamber event, a networking event, and you wear the little name tag, and it said instructional designer, and people were like head clueless of what that was.
Yeah, what is that?
Right. So an instructional designer is somebody who writes training material and maybe does them in a stand-up environment or writes them so they're e-learning or does a webinar.
Okay, got it.
Right. And so that's what I did. I wrote corporate end user training on financial packages, which is hilarious because I don't have a financial background. But people's eyes would glaze over. They just were like, oh my God. And so I ended the conversation saying to them, but I'm going to start a website called Advocate for Mom and Dad for adult children of aging parents. And I got every person's story. Every person's story. And I went, wow. That night I met a woman who's a blogger. A shout out to her, Striped Spatula, Amanda Biddle. She was so generous with taking me through what I need to do to blog on my website. I met a woman who's a financial planner. Shout out to Nancy Soman and Professional Paperwork Services. And she said, I'd love to write for your blog. This is what I do. And then I actually spilled the wine on the shoes of the woman who is the marketing person for the Small Business Development Center out of the College of New Jersey. And they helped me write a business plan. Met 3 people. I realized other people had stories to tell and they needed guidance. And I walked out of there and said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And it's in my 3rd year. I'm self-funding and I'm starting to turn the corner with making money.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So what kind of services do you provide? Tell us a little bit about that. How do you work with your clients And where does somebody get started with you?
Sure, absolutely. So, so I am a certified caregiver consultant, and so what that is I am trained on the 6 stages of caregiving and what people need at those different caregiving stages, and I combine that with what I know from our caregiving experience and what I've done with my mom. I do a tremendous amount of networking. And so I have lots of resources that I can tap into to help people. People find me through word of mouth. People find me on my website. And people find me through things like this. And basically, and it's really interesting because people might know the term aging life care manager. They might know the term geriatric care manager. And what I do crosses over to what they do, but here's the difference. A geriatric care manager is going to create a care plan and then walk you through it. They will actually go to the assisted living with you, and they will help answer the questions and find resources. And they have a much deeper medical background than I do.
Okay.
I come in and I say, what are your 3 biggest worries, right? Let's create a plan for those 3 biggest worries. I will do the research and give you the resources, and I'm going to empower you to do the work and be the advocate. So the geriatric care manager does a lot more hand-holding and does a lot of the work where I'm giving you the resources to do the work. What I'm finding is people really want to do it. They're just like, where do I start?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, let me tell you.
Yeah.
What's your 3 biggest worries? Let me tell you where to start.
Yeah.
And so the business model I have is we'll do a half-hour call, and then I ask you for 3 hours. If you need more than that, we'll contract for more. But I've worked with people for just 3 hours and given them lots of resources. And I'm like, if you need help, come back to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's this interesting niche that's a level below what a geriatric care manager needs. But we offer many of the same kind of services. I'm just not going to hold your hand as much.
So when you sit down and you ask somebody, you think back across all of your clients over the last couple of years, do you see the 3 worries are pretty similar across the board, or are they, how does that look?
It's as different as the families.
Is that right?
It's as, because part of it depends on where are you catching them. Are you catching them at the crisis where, mom or dad is leaving the hospital and going to rehab, and you're like, oh my God, what next?
Right.
And so I'm like, first of all, have they been admitted or are they under observation status? And let me tell you why I want to know that. And second of all, do you have power of attorney for finances? Because anybody you talk to are going to want that. Yeah. So it's what's happening right there.
Yeah.
And then it's so what else are your worries? So one client was, when dad leaves rehab, does he go home or somewhere else? So let's talk about what that means, both scenarios, and what you have to have in place.
Yeah.
And it's as much educating as anything else. The last client I worked with was actually a woman in her late 50s with early onset Alzheimer's. And she came back to New Jersey after living in California, high-powered career, a lot going on in her life. And although she's lost her processes, she's used to being active. Mm-hmm. So what I did was find resources for the family to use to keep her active, right? So, for example, we found students who are OT students who would come in and be a dementia care companion. Found a St. Hubert, which is an animal rescue organization that would allow her to come in and work with the cats, and after a while she could work with the dogs. Found an organization that does circus classes, right? They would, and as long as she has a dementia companion, she can take those classes.
Sure.
Found a personal trainer organization who would actually take her hiking. They didn't have to be. So, and if you don't know where to look, so we spent time, what are her interests?
Right.
Animals, active, hiking. Okay, let me look for your resources.
Now, when you work with families, and let's say, let's use my family as an example. So my mom and dad are in Green Bay. I have a sister and a brother-in-law and nephews in Green Bay, probably a 2 or 3 minute drive away. But the rest of the siblings are spread out, one in Portland, one in New Orleans, one in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. Do you work with the family that are remote? I mean, because I could see where if the family's not all on the same page, mom or dad can call, if dad's not getting the answer he wants to hear from Diane, who's in Green Bay, he's picking up the phone and see if he can get the answer he wants to hear out of me.
Absolutely.
So how do you coordinate all that
Yeah.
so you don't have
Yeah.
like a problem at the end of the
right at the
Yeah.
end, yeah, and that actually happened with one family, and even though they were all local, they were all local, there came a point where I said, I want you guys to get together
Yeah.
and be on the same page when you walk in to talk to your dad, because otherwise he's going to play you off one another. He's doing it now, and that you need to nip.
Well,
that
I
in
was
the
going to
bud.
say, just like you did, I think it's time I say you're working me over here.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. So part of the way we work this is we have, once we decide to work together, we have a weekly call, and that is a call that is convenient to everybody. Like one call was 6:30 in the morning. Somebody was on a train, somebody was driving, somebody hadn't left for work, right? In that weekly call, how are your loved ones? What happened this week? What did you accomplish? Because each of you get a to-do list. Each of you have something to do, whether
Right.
it's research or whatever. I want to report from everybody how you did on your to-do list. And then we do a to-do list for the next week. And then you get typed notes of what happened.
Mm.
And it's basically project management 101, which
Sure.
I did for years.
Yeah.
Right? But what families tell me is it keeps us on task. It keeps us on target. And in that call, you will get into family dynamics.
Yeah, I would imagine.
You will get into family dynamics, and you have to gauge how much do you let them talk. When do you say, okay, Dad's going to continue to work with you if you don't, and there's usually one point person, and so you try and work with them. And part of it is just communication techniques. And
Yeah.
Part of it is, so my background is actually in home economics and family and child development. So I understand family dynamics, and understanding, as you work with them, you get to understand the family dynamics. You can do a little bit of helping them understand. It's like, yeah, it's your big brother and they've always done this. I understand that's frustrating, but they have this task to do, and they may do it differently than you, but that's their strength, and you need to let them do it.